Welcome to another episode of the Life Sciences Professional Podcast. Today I have a guest with me who I've known for many years, Byron MacPhee, and he is going to share with us his experience over a number of years being in the medical device industry, but more importantly, what his experience has been helping his company, Juzo, start up a Canadian entity. They were here in Canada, but what they were wanting to do was to establish a Canadian sales team and business entity here, and they hired Byron to do that. And he's going to share some of his challenges and experience of doing that. Please welcome Byron. Thanks, Byron, for joining us. Byron, we've known each other for a number of years. I think the first we met each other was at Pharma Science when you were a sales rep, and then you progressed to manager. And I think next we worked together at Sigvaris, and you were a sales leader there, and you moved to the US and so forth. So now work together at Juzo. So I'm really looking forward to you sharing your journey, because there's so many people I speak to when I'm recruiting and talking to individuals. They're saying they're not sure what they want to do with their careers or what the opportunities are in medical device, right? And you're a perfect example of all the things that you can do if you aspire to go into leadership, and whether you want to stay in Canada, go to the US, and you've done it all. So
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Linda. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So before we get started, maybe you could tell a little bit more about yourself and let our listeners know more about Byron and what your experience has been, if you don't mind.
For sure. Born and raised in Cape Breton Island. Went to university in Halifax at St. Mary's University and took a Bachelor of Commerce degree. That's going back a few years now. As with anyone else, when you grow up on the East Coast, you find your way to Toronto. And so I did that, came to Toronto, and ended up starting to work with a company called Frank W. Horner. So that was my first sales job of selling Gravol and Diavol and OTC products that it turned out to be a wonderful opportunity, because you got to detail physicians, you also got to detail pharmacists and dentists. So I didn't know it at the time, but it was a wonderful foundation. Moved from there to a company called Novopharm, which is now Teva, and had the opportunity with them. After coming to Ontario, they moved me back to New Brunswick. And so I worked in New Brunswick for about a year and a half, and at which time I was transferred back here to the Niagara Peninsula and worked in that territory for a number of years. Ended up leaving the generic drug industry after, about 9 years, and went into compression garments. You had mentioned Sigvaris. So I've worked with Sigvaris, based originally in Canada as a territory manager, then a regional sales manager, and then was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity in the US, just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, in Peachtree City, to be VP of sales for their organization. Spent 8 years in that role, and then it was time to come back to Canada. And I've been extremely fortunate to work with Juzo Canada for the last, it's almost 9 years now, when I checked the calendar.
Wow. It's gone by fast, hasn't it? When you think about it, I look at it, and I was looking at your background and how many years that you've been in each role. I think 8 years with Juzo, and now 8 years. Well, you were 8 years with Sigvaris, 8 years with Juzo now, so it's you're not a jumper, that's for sure.
it actually hits home when you're talking about how long we've known each other.
Yeah.
In the different roles and different past experiences. It's been several years.
Yeah, that's for sure. And your career has been fantastic, and I think an inspiration for others. So if you could share with individual contributors thinking about going into management and have an eye on, senior leadership, what tips would you share with them if they're thinking about that? Because it's not for everybody, right? And you've coached and mentored many people that have reported to you, but what would you say to your younger self if you were thinking about going into it? But what would you say to them?
To go back and reflect, I think the biggest thing would be to get yourself involved. We always hear the adage, become an expert in your field. If my younger self, I would question, did I really know and understand what that meant in terms of becoming an expert, not only in our product, but in insurance coverages. And in our industry now, we have provincial reimbursement for based on different provinces. You need to become an expert in all of those things. And if you're not, then it's going to catch you at some point in your career. Whereas if you are interested, intrigued, and ready to roll up your sleeves and learn those pieces, it can really make a big difference. Second thing I would reflect on is if I had my time over again, I would, in Canada especially, learn a second language. One of my biggest regrets is not learning French to a level that would better support me in my work and personal life. And now with Canada becoming more multicultural beside that, Canada, I have a work colleague who I'm very jealous of. She speaks 4 languages. and I must tell her probably once a week, I am so jealous of that piece. So if I had the chance to go back, those would be 2 things. The only other thing I would encourage my younger self to do would be to really take the time to know who the decision makers are in my industry. Because at some point, you're going to need to have relationships with those people if you're going to prosper and grow.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting, when you go into management, I think when you're in sales, an individual contributor, and you're looking at decisions the company you're working for makes, it's very easy to judge or criticize or get frustrated and wonder why, things happen. And, back orders, or all of a sudden products are no longer continued. And I remember being as individual contributor before I went into management, and other team members, and even myself, I would think, why are they doing that? And why are those decisions being made? But when you go into a leadership role, when all of a sudden you're one of those people, and you see, the operations of the organization, marketing and finance, and the expenses that operating the business, what it costs, you realize why decisions are made and how little you knew as an individual contributor. That often, when I'm talking to reps and they're complaining about their organization or their manager, things that are happening, I often will say to them, it's really important to be expert in what you're doing, just like you're saying, but also learn and understand, ask questions to seek to understand more about why decisions are being made. Don't be so quick to judge or criticize. There's reasons things are happening. The business needs to be profitable and successful, and they're not doing things necessarily to hurt you, but to make sure that they can still employ you and that the company can still be profitable and successful. And I often share with them that, when I was a rep, I didn't necessarily know the things that I really should have until I went into management, and then my eyes were wide open. So it's very different, right? When you go into it, for sure.
It really is. Yeah.
And, over the years, you built many teams and, developing cultures. And you engaged a lot in the field. I remember that it didn't matter which company, whether it was Sigvaris or even currently Juzo or Pharma Science for that matter. But that was your style, and still is today. And some leaders are really, they're more, coach from afar. They don't necessarily. I'm shocked actually sometimes when I talk to sales reps and they say, well, no, my manager's never. I've worked with them for 4 years. They've maybe been in the field with me once or twice. They're in meetings all the time. No, they don't. They coach from afar. And they don't really understand what's going on in the field. And others will say, I have a great manager, comes out in the field with me once every couple of weeks. They provide high level support when I need it, those sorts of things. And, then there are others that micromanage and are in the field all the time. They don't like that. But your style was definitely, going and meeting with KOLs or getting a good understanding to learn the business. Can you expand on that and talk about the culture that you would build and why your leadership style is what it is, and how you think that benefits the business?
I always started every position that I had right at the beginning by defining who my largest customers were. And then I would go see those people and ask them, would you mind if I worked for you for a day so that I can learn your business? Not only did it afford me the opportunity to get to know them on a more personal basis, but I found every time that I tried to do that, people were so accommodating and so forthright with information that could help you. So in our world, we have a saying with our reps about connect the dots. So our world is physicians and prescribers. Our world is where that compression garment is dispensed, whether it's a home health care or a pharmacy, and then of course the patient. And our world is how do we connect each of those components so that we have a team, for lack of a better term, so that we're all working and rowing in the same direction. For me, I think part of it, if I'm being 100% honest with you, I'd rather be out on the road than in the office. If I'm being totally transparent, I've always enjoyed the customers and the prescribers that are out there. There are so many wonderful people out there who are willing to help you. One of my mentors years ago, he taught me, whenever you're making a call, a detail call, you treat that as a break in that person's day. And that's stuck with me over the years. So when we're out on the road and we have an opportunity to meet with someone, we still do that. We treat it as a break in their day. It's not just a full walk-in, we're going to detail you on our product. Let's get to know that person so that we can have a better working relationship in the long term.
And understand their business and bring value to their business and do all of the, ROI, what's happening there. And it's like trust. People buy from people they like and trust, right? And that they feel are intelligent business partners. It's at the end of the day, right?
And if you ask questions, people are truly accommodating. They will really give you the time of day to help you. And it's just a matter of sometimes sitting and asking that question.
Well, I know many of your reps, like your national reps or regional reps, they followed your lead. They managed that way too, right? They would go out in the field and they were very personable with their reps and with the customers, and they knew them. They understood the business. And, when reps leave, if your managers don't know the region as well, it's a huge void. Everyone's scrambling.
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
they seem to, have a really good understanding for sure. You mentioned to me recently, you said that you learned it's essential to be a sponge. And it does make a difference what role you've been in. It's probably even more important the higher up you get, right?
Hmm.
That's being in an organization, the more you need to be recognized. You don't know everything, right? That you said that, it's kind of
Hmm.
it's kind of an epiphany, right? That, when you're younger in
Yeah.
learning your role, you're learning a lot. But as you progress in your roles within the organization, it's so important that you said that you realize that, you just so much information is coming at us. And it's interesting. I think to myself, even, when you said that, I thought, it's very interesting because it's true. Like I do that
Hmm.
myself. I'm always learning from my clients. And, every morning when I get ready with my iPad,
Hmm.
and my iPad's with me, and I've got my, I'm listening, and, I'm doing my hair and doing my makeup. I'm learning every morning. And that's my routine. And it's exactly what you're talking about. We're sponges because we've got to be current on, like, listening to authorities in the industry, current information. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And if we don't, we're behind. But I think the top performers in any industry, they've got to keep their skills current, whether it's me improving on, recruitment techniques or coaching techniques or, YouTube videos, whatever it is I'm trying to learn,
Yeah.
right? And is that what you were referring to in terms of that?
Well, as I think about it, if I go back in time, the first mentors that I had, yes, they would say treat it like a break in someone's day. When I was interviewing with Novo Farm, this is 30 years ago, I went to a pharmacy ahead of time and asked about the company, and they said, come by at 2:45 on Monday, and a gentleman named Al Dawson, who's the rep, will be here. I said, you're sure he'll be there at 2:45? Yeah. He's here every third Wednesday, or every third Monday at 2:45. So I showed up, met Al Dawson. I ended up getting hired, and Al Dawson was my trainer.
No.
And, and Al used to keep a calendar, but he would make a copy. So, and it said, all going well, my next visit will be on whatever day of the week it was, Tuesday. And you would circle the calendar. It was go back in those days when everything was paper. But it was, to me, just the smartest way of gaining the trust of your customer. Because if you tell your customer you're going to be there every third Wednesday or third Monday at a specific time, and you keep your word, you're already starting to develop that trust factor that your client will be, and you will be looking for. So to me, it's interesting to go back into the older times. When I say the older times, if I go back 30, I go back 30 years ago. And now if I compare it to today, and okay, we have, yes, social media and CRM systems and all of these upgrades, but it still comes down to gaining trust,
Right.
both within your company. Also comes down to gaining trust between a manager and their territory manager who reports to them. The trust component becomes front and center, paramount. Has to be. Time will never change that.
Well, and that is so true because, when you talk to representatives, and I interview them all day, every day, and whether it be, just sales reps who just started out or very experienced, or even executives at very high levels, those are things that I can tell right away when I'm interviewing people how good they are in terms of the skills they've developed. So time management, negotiation skills, organization, interpersonal skills, EQ, like all of those things that they've developed along the way. So to your point about dependability, consistency, and also how often they do things. Like it's just that, for instance, with him, he probably saw, other people see 5 a day, he probably saw 10 a day. And he was very dependable. But what's interesting too with you following, I think when I was listening to you, thinking about the interview process, so a lot of times candidates don't do much to research for interviews or do the follow-up like you did. So, calling that customer, trying to find out information about the organization and them telling you, well, the rep's going to be there, and then you go meet with the rep. I often suggest that. And even to this day, so many representatives need to follow the lead that you did in terms of contacting the companies, reaching out to the reps, doing your research, because you want to work for a company, first and foremost, that you feel comfortable with, that you get good information, positive information from the representative that's currently working there. But also when you're interviewing, when you interviewed with the company and they asked you, what do you know about our company? And you said, well, actually, I spoke to a customer and I spoke to your rep, and that rep happened to be the trainer. And I'm sure the trainer, I'm sure he spoke to them about you, right? So those are key things, but they're also traits that you carry with you into the job once you're hired, because they're traits you have, right?
And I don't have to tell you, as I've interviewed over the years, when I have gotten a phone call from one of our clients saying, we have a candidate who is going to be interviewing with you next week, that always impressed me. That person would go and do that. That's a very much a positive step forward.
Yeah, it's for sure. It's the initiative, the drive, right? Yeah, for sure. You can't make somebody that way. Now, I know that we mentioned earlier that you moved to the U.S. and you're an expat. Can you share that experience? And some people consider it, and I have candidates that are concerned about all of the restructuring and mergers and things that are happening here, and they think, oh, well, I want to go to the US, how do I do it? And I quickly explained to them that's not so easy. It's so easy. Now you were obviously with Sigvaros as a regional manager, and then they transferred you, but can you share what that experience was like? And there's so many things that people don't consider. It was a very positive experience, but there are things personally and professionally, and maybe you could share what that experience was like for you.
Well, to start, I was in the U.S. for 8 years, so my wife and I, my wife has just been wonderful in terms of supporting my career. We were apart for 8 years, which meant we had a home in the States and we had a home here, but there's a big price to pay when you are apart, and you have to be prepared for that if that is part of that person's scenario. The move itself was exciting, and in my years in the U.S., there's only 4 states that I've not visited. So I was on planes quite a lot. You do run into the trap of working when your spouse or your family are not with you. You do run into the trap of working and working and working. And you have to get to the point and working. And you have to get to the point of recognizing, for me, if I was going to go work with one of our territory managers on a Monday, I started flying on a Friday night or a Saturday and spending time to meet their family, to just go and recognize what's available. I can still remember driving into San Antonio, Texas, Cinco de Mayo, and we are in the biggest car jam, and all you can smell is the most delicious food. And it's like let me out of this car. But there's so many wonderful opportunities to take advantage of, but at the same time, be cognizant of the fact that whether it's you're applying for a green card, if that's part of the exercise, are you buying a home? Do you have plans on bringing your spouse down? If you're bringing your spouse down, do they currently work, and do they want to work down there? Well, obviously there's conditions that have to be met. So there's a lot to consider. But I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I have a number of clients that they're Canadian and they're working in the US as executives, and some have moved their spouses and their children. But to your point, a lot of times, the spouse isn't working, and you bring the kids, and if you're down there 8 years, 12 years, those kids grow into young people ready to go to university. All sorts of scenarios can happen. So yeah, there's lots to consider about that. And also, I'm sure culturally there were some differences. What were some of the things that you noticed from a cultural perspective? Maybe HR differences, as an example, that are different there than here that you had to adjust to very quickly.
Well, the at-will state was by far the most prominent part of becoming aware of that aspect of U.S. law. We were in Georgia. Georgia was an at-will state, and the whole process of hiring and letting people go was an eye-opener for me. When I went down there, it was something I didn't anticipate. It was a surprise, but once you again understand the what at will means, and then it's something that you have to deal with in your work environment in the United States. It's just reality.
Right. And things have changed now. At will still exists, obviously, but then, they've disability, workman's comp has changed. Disability management, just as it is here in Canada, has really become hyper aware and implemented a lot more systems and processes have been put in place to help accommodate people. That's for sure. And, Labor Standards Act being put in place has really made a difference too.
Without question.
So there's, all these nuances that have changed, but also every state has some differences as well, which, there's so many states that from a leader, I'm sure that kind of took you by surprise. At least in Canada, we have less provinces, so it's a little easier. But even some of the provinces, there's some differences there, right? So
without question, question.
So what was it like for you coming back to Canada? What were some of the biggest changes that you noticed?
The coming home obviously is wonderful on a personal note. Friends and family, that part goes without saying. When you're away from the country and you come back, you don't really realize how multicultural this country is until you come back home. And it's in 8 years I was very surprised at how much it had progressed in terms of the different cultures and the business pieces that go with it, whether it's the language laws in Quebec or when you're here in the Greater Toronto area, and you start to see each of the different ethnicities have their own part of town in a more prominent way. It's absolutely wonderful.
Mhm.
I, to me, there's nothing better than understanding and learning about the cultures, the different cultures that are out there, and we're lucky in what we do, that we deal with so many of those cultures, and people again just are so wonderful in inviting you in, whether it's for a meal or to. We've been to birthday celebrations. We've been to New Year celebrations. It's really something that you don't expect, but at the same time, it's the best. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're an East Coaster, so you love all that. So, right, that's
Exactly.
that's the way you are for sure.
Mhm.
You're like that in return as well. So you coming back to Canada and having an opportunity to help Juzo here. I mean, they already had a presence with their products here in Canada, but
Mhm.
we're looking for a leader in terms of helping enhance their commercialization and set up
Mhm.
office here and so forth. So
Mhm.
can you kind of expand on what that experience has been like? Because there are a lot of companies and they reach out to us all the time to say, hey, we're looking at, whether it's, global, could be Germany or US a lot, where they're wanting to set up a Canadian entity here. And that's not an easy
Mhm.
undertaking by any stretch of the imagination. But, what has that experience been like? And maybe you could just expand on that.
Dealing with a parent company in the U.S. has been a really positive experience for me. The company's been so helpful in terms of helping Juzo Canada become established. We incorporated in 2014 and hired sales staff, territory managers on the road. So that was the first step in the evolution for us. So making arrangements for marketing support and the accounting side and what has to be done with Health Canada and Revenue Canada, those are all pieces that candidly our parent company have been just the best at. I can't say how much I thank them for that. And for anyone in the same environment, you really want to have that support system that can help you get your foundation, because there's a lot of work that goes into each of those aspects. For us, with the number of SKUs we have to register with Health Canada, it's not a quick process.
So patience would be your first.
Patience would be the first part, but again, that's where if I had my colleagues from the U.S. on, I would say thank you to them. That they've really been supportive, and if I didn't have that resource, there you would have to find some help to satisfy the needs that are there, whether it's a class 1, 2, 3, 4 device. That part comes front and center, has to be done.
Yeah. And and from the customer's perspective, how have they responded to the fact that Juzo now has a stronger presence here in Canada? And
yeah, that's been a great part to see. We started off doing everything was going swimmingly, and then of course COVID hit, and made changes, as with every company. We're fortunate that our company has a great reputation in the industry, and the people that we deal with are very loyal in terms of their support. So it's been a wonderful exercise in how we grow. Our challenge is, of course, Canada's such a big country. How do we get our message out to those that we need to get our message out to, both in a geographical sense? So how do you get to Newfoundland, or how do you get to Yukon, and so on and so forth. So the social media piece has come in, the use of Teams and Zoom. Those are all different changes than if you go back 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Those are all evolutions that are great. Again, if I go back to what I said earlier, we need to become an expert in how to use these to our best advantage.
Yeah, exactly. Now, over the years, you've had lots of different sales trainers and coaches that you've utilized in your organizations. Either they've been brought in, or you've brought them in. What are your thoughts in terms of arm-like decisions around that versus like a sales leader bringing those people in terms of whether they're like adopted by the sales team and the impact and the positive impact? Because and the reason I ask that, I get asked a fair bit from sales leaders in terms of who would I recommend for sales training or coaching to help either an individual that's struggling or just their team. And so what are your thoughts in terms of, making the decision to bring in sales training or coaches to really help, kind of, develop your team and help them either improve their skills or inspire them a little bit more?
The development of team members is always going to be paramount. One of the challenges, though, is if you go forward and just hire, as an example, a sales trainer, you have to ask yourself the question prior to that: how long is it going to take them to know your industry well enough that they can teach it in an effective manner? And dependent upon your industry, that may or may not be a barrier. For us, it takes a sales representative, a territory manager, when they come in, it's going to take them a full year before they really have the knowledge and their feet under them prior to really feeling comfortable and firm. The part that the education process still requires, though, you could go and hire a specialist for hospitals, as an example. And candidly, I've done that in the past, where I had a prior hospital representative, brought that gentleman in, and that was the total focus of that training. That aspect seemed to work quite well in terms of the training. The other part, in terms of training, territory managers, when you're looking for their backgrounds and skill sets, how effective are they at territory management, and how quickly can you get them working effectively? That old adage about, do you work hard or do you work smart? We're always going to look for that person who travels and works effectively, and that's a skill set that's hard to teach. And so in real terms, that's what I'm looking for in a sales trainer prior to anything, is do they have the experience in terms of knowing how to manage and prioritize their time in terms of travel.
Well, it's interesting you said that, in terms of the experience, because there's so much training going on out there, like, virtual training or it's a huge booming business. But I find that so many of them, they've never done it, or they've done it very little. The same as consultants or recruiters or whoever. If people haven't really done the job or really have the skills, the results are going to be relatable. So the same as the training, and you've always been really good at identifying exactly where's the gap in the skills that your team has that's hindering their success, hindering the growth of the company or the business and just focusing on that one area. And I think, that's important. Or if there's a team member that has that one area that really seems to be affecting them from being confident or competent, right, and just helping them develop. So,
and a lot of times you'll have a strong territory manager who has that skill set too, and
right.
we always try to take advantage of that where possible. It's important that the existing team feels like it's their business, and feel comfortable that they can come with a suggestion, or that we can rely on them. It's something that I've always enjoyed, watching some of our more successful people become leaders. It's a wonderful thing to see. Awards night for our teams was, candidly, it was my favorite day of the year. just to be on stage and bring up the award winners and watch the reactions, and it was really
well, I think it can. I think of Jen and Kate, and they were reps, right? That you gave added opportunity to coach and help others, and then they became leaders, right? And were always up on the stage. They were fantastic. There were others too, obviously, but and they're still both doing really well. So it's to your point, you let them coach and train other reps in the field, the skills that they were really good at, and then eventually they're sales leaders. So
that's right.
So one last question, Byron. Any funny stories that you want to share, or experiences you had in your career that we haven't touched on, that you think individuals can benefit from?
I think it's important to find the right company. In my circumstance, Anne-Rose Zorn West is the primary owner of Juzo Canada, well, Juzo in North America. And just after I was hired, I was invited to a meeting in the US. Got down to Ohio for the meeting, and I'm at the hotel and no one's there. And I call Anne-Rose and she's like, "Nobody called you? There's a storm coming in. The meeting's been canceled." And so she goes, "You drive to my place right now. You're staying at my house." and I said, "No, I'm going to head home." She goes, "You can't head home." I said, "I'm Canadian. I can drive in the snow." So I drive, make the drive back from Ohio, Akron. About 10 o'clock that night, I get to the border, and here's the owner of our company. She calls me just as I'm crossing the border, and she said, "Where are you?" And I say, "I'm at the border." And she goes, "I'm in my jammies. I can't go to bed until I know you're home." When I got off the phone with her, I called my wife directly and said, "I'm in the right company." And it's for anyone out there, find the right company. It will really pay spades for you.
Yeah, that's I 100% agree. Well, that's what we do, right? That's but not everybody gets that, right? They chase the wrong thing in the company, or they don't do their homework, and then they end up, I call it, from frying pan into the fire.
That's right.
And you want to, it's the fit. And you just described the fit. It's the organization that you knew was a great fit for you because of what's important to you. And that they care about their people, and you care about people, and you like to connect with individuals, whether it be customers or people that you work with, and that's the company you're with. So and you always speak very highly of them, and you have since day one. So
they're a wonderful group to work with. So.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, good. Well, thank you very much, Byron. I know that our listeners will really appreciate everything you've shared, and I know that I've always enjoyed all of the experiences that we've had together, and watching your career has been just terrific, and
Well,
I look forward to continuing working together and spending time together. So thanks so much for
Linda,
sharing.
thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the time, and I look forward to working together as we go forward.
Yeah, that's great.